This quest was insane for how many lore bombs it dropped in such a short amount of time. Did everyone feel that way? It must have been the shortest Archon quest, but here on this channel, size doesn't matter because we have a lot to unload when it comes to the lore of Genshin Impact. Dainsleif really pulled through for this Archon quest, and we finally have answers to some of Genshin's biggest questions, and of course, more questions. So let's get into it. Today we're gonna go through the 4.7 Archon Quest bedtime story and analyze and theorize all the details and clues that we were left with in the aftermath. Just when you thought you could catch your breath, Hoyo knows how to leave you winded yet again. I'm your Leafy Lore Shira Minzlif, and I read the Genshin Impact lore so that you don't have to. The quest begins at the Sumeru Adventurers Guild with a commission from Catherine. This particular commission has been in the guild's backlog, and there are records of numerous failed attempts. It seems that this is a job that only Traveler and Paimon can complete. The commission is simple: find a missing person. The residents of Vimara Village filed a missing persons report, but there are several issues. They have no idea what this person's name is or where he comes from, and they only know very general descriptions about his appearance. He's a young guy in his early 20s and is super kind and super helpful to the village. Okay, so it's probably not one of Sumeru's playable roster. Asking the villagers about this missing person also yields no results. No name, no nothing. This leads Traveler to theorize that there's mass alteration of people's memories happening, since this missing person is someone who only seems to exist in people's memories. There is one NPC, however, who seems to remember something more concrete about our missing person. Atosa was allegedly a close friend of this missing person, and they often chatted away under a tree, which she leads us to. Even if it felt like we'd been talking for hours, the sun would still be at the same position in the sky. This detail's gonna matter, I promise. The time of day this talk would occur is at dusk. The investigation is interrupted when the group observes Hilichurls acting a little crazy. Apparently, the Hilichurls in the area have become way more aggressive recently. On cue, an Abyss Mage shows up, indicating that the Abyss Order might be up to no good in the area. The group runs into Dainsleif, who'd also been tracking Abyss Order activity and had noticed that something was off about Vimara Village. It's here in this moment where we get some of the biggest lore mysteries answered. I was honestly gagged because we learned so much in so little time, and it's a lot to process. We'll break it down in a sec, but it's a lot, so get ready. Traveler asks Dainsleif about the crystal who called itself the Sinner back in the Caribert Archon quest. This crystal Sinner was one of the 5 Sinners of Khaenri'ah, and we actually know most of them. These 5 sinners were considered the best of the best in their respective fields, and according to Dainsleif, he and the 5 sinners were supposed to work together to stop the Vinster King from shaking the foundations of the world. But all 5 could not resist the call of the Abyss. When the cataclysm occurred, none of them stood up in defense of their nation, and thus Dainsleif seeks vengeance on all of them. The 5 sinners are as follows: Hrothgatyr the Wise, Reindotyr Gold, who's Albedo's master, Surtology the Foul, who's Skirk's master, Rerir Reichir of Solnari, and the 5th, the sinner in the crystal, Vedrfolnir the Visionary, who also happens to be Dainsleif's older brother. Honestly, Dainsleif having an older brother was one of the biggest lore drops for me, but put a bookmark on this because we're gonna dissect who they all are, what became of them, all of it after the summary. The Traveler's concerned because it seems Dainsleif's older brother Vedrfolnir was able to coerce their sibling into joining the Abyss. We saw our sibling's memory back in the Caribert Archon quest. Dainsleif warns that if our sibling isn't stopped, the day is sure to come when they will also betray the entire world. Dainsleif had been investigating the Loom of Fate while he was away for like a year. Back in the We Will Be Reunited Archon quest, the Loom of Fate was an Abyss Order operation which required a component known as the Eye of the First Field Tiller. Dainsleif took that component and has since hidden it away from the Abyss Order. He also speculates that the Loom of Fate might have something to do with the ley lines. Wherever the Abyss Order seems to be working on the Loom of Fate operation, the more that particular area experiences crazy leyline disruptions. These leyline disruptions can cause memory issues since memories flow through these ley lines. It's why not too far from this area, Traveler experienced her siblings' memories in the Caribert Archon quests. Now, we're dealing with a missing person that only exists in people's memories. The trio conspire to continue their investigations the next day and head to bed. The next day, Dainsleif comes to a startling realization. This missing person might possess the ability to implant memories into the minds of others. And how did he come to that conclusion? A memory of the missing person suddenly popped into his mind. Apparently, he had a memory of him giving the missing person the eye of the first field tiller, despite never having met this missing person before. It seems that the villagers all have fake memories. Memories that should not exist, according to the title of the quest section. It turns out the Abyss Order is still looking for the Eye of the First Field Tiller. Since Dainsleif is the only person who'd know its location, implanting these false memories into his mind is the Abyss Order's way of getting Dainsleif to check up on it and potentially lead the Order right to it. Travelers worried they'd be followed, but since Dainsleif is ultra giga smart, then they trust that Dainsleif definitely already foresaw this ploy. Dainsleif takes us to the Place of Revelations, which looks eerily similar to the Caribert Archon Quest domain. There's a cool detail here though. Right when you enter the domain, there are 6 statues with one being completely broken. It probably represents the 5 sinners and Dainsleif as the broken statue since he was the only one to reject the call of the abyss. As they traverse the domain, Dainsleif feels a disturbance in the ley lines since he's super sensitive to them. Neither Paimon nor Traveler feel it. He commands the two to leave the domain to check up on Vimara village. Traveler notes that Dainsleif seems to be acting a little strange. The duo leave right when the Abyss sibling shows up, and Dainsleif reveals that he intentionally followed the Abyss Order's trap in order to meet up with the Abyss sibling. Traveler and Paimon return to Vimara village where they notice the once agitated Hilichurls are now super calm. We hear a voice comforting the Hilichurls. If you look closely, there are glowing butterflies which seem to trail up to the sky. The pair check up on the villagers who suddenly state that they don't remember a missing villager. Huh? Look closely at this scene though. It's dusk again. Time doesn't seem to be moving at all. Memory implantation is imperfect, it seems, and one way to tell that a memory is fake is that time doesn't move. With all the leyline disruptions and memory shenanigans, Traveler comes to the conclusion that they are in Atosa's memory. We're at the point in her memories before this missing person actually goes missing. Traveler and Paimon rush to the tree she showed them previously, and there they finally catch this missing person. Who turns out to be Caribert. Caribert! Look at the tie on his arm! Caribert takes Traveler into the realm of his consciousness to chat and explains what happened to him since the last time we saw him. Caribert's life was sacrificed to create the Loom of Fate, and what we currently see is what's left of his consciousness. So basically, he's been dead since the Caribert Archon quest, and the only reason the people of Vimara village seem to know him is because of memories he implanted into them. The armband is actually a nice subtle indication that he doesn't actually exist in the real world, since the armband was actually found buried with Clothar's body in the previous Caribert Archon quest. The memory implantation was his innocent attempt at trying to experience being alive. The only way he felt alive was living through fond memories of people in Vimara village. In its incomplete form, the Loom of Fate is able to create memories. But Caribert needed the Loom of Fate to be complete to achieve his ultimate goal. In order to do this, he had to finesse Dainsleif. All along, Dainsleif had the Eye of the First Field Tiller inside his body. This was actually a joke in my Twitch stream, that the reason Dainsleif clenches his cheek so hard is because he's trying to hide the Eye of the First Field Tiller, and I'm laughing because this crack theory ended up being true after almost 2 years. In order to get the eye from Dainsleif, Caribert gave him false memories of him handing the eye to Traveler and Paimon and then asking them to leave the domain. Caribert states that the Loom of Fate is now complete, implying that Dainsleif lost the fight and the eye to the Abyss sibling. This alteration of Dainsleif's memories is probably why Traveler felt that Dainsleif was acting strange. Caribert's final goal is this. For years, he'd been suffering with the Hilichurl curse, and the only thing that could quell his torment was his father's bedtime story. Caribert needed the Loom of Fate in its near-completed form, when its ability to create memories was at its strongest, to implant a specific memory into the Hilichurls. This memory was a fairy tale that would effectively soothe the Hilichurls in the area, so at least they no longer had to suffer like he did. Here's a compiled text of Caribert's bedtime story to the Hilichurls, and you can pause to read it. There's also text on the screen that appears before we enter Caribert's consciousness, and the text is a goodbye message to Atosa. The Loom of Fate is intended to create ley lines, which are a network of elemental energies and memories of everything that has existed in Teyvat. They are the roots of the massive Irminsul tree. Think of it like a massive history database. Creating new ley lines could potentially give the Abyss Order the power to rewrite history. With his goal now accomplished, Caribert's consciousness finally disappears. The Abyss sibling arrives too late to say goodbye to Care Bear, but they insist on staying with the Traveler for a chat. Neither are unfortunately able to hug each other. Since they both don't belong in this realm of consciousness, they both aren't tangible. Can we just take in this moment for a second? This is the first time since version 1.4 that the Traveler has been with their sibling like this. And now we're here in 4.7, finally seeing them interact. The Abyss sibling states that the Order is trying to use the Loom of Fate before the Heavenly Principles wakes up. After the Hydro Archon's ultimate act of defiance, destroying the Hydro Throne so that there can no longer be a Hydro Archon, the Heavenly Principles took no action, leading the Abyss Order to conclude that the Heavenly Principles is still asleep. And it's been asleep since the Cataclysm 500 years ago, apparently. The sibling warns that the Heavenly Principles will awaken, they just don't know when or how. One of their reasons for hating the Heavenly Principles is because it seems to do terrible things to good people, like depriving the kind-hearted Care Bear a chance at life. The sibling refers to our Traveler by their actual name, Aether or Lumine, and the text reflects that. Our Traveler notes that they're the only person in this world to call them by their actual name. Traveler has one question for their sibling. Why can't they complete their journey together? The sibling gives us a really vague, cryptic answer, so let's try to decipher it. When the sibling reached the end of their journey, while our Traveler was allegedly asleep, they reached a place known as the Sea of Flowers at the end. The Traveler had apparently told them that they wished to find a place in the universe where that one flower was in full bloom. That flower being the Intevat. Our siblings saw a field full of Intevats and considered it coincidence. They also state that as war continues to rage and until they seek that final answer, they can't leave. This is my initial guess as to what the sibling may have meant. In the Natitzenkreuz questline, during the Marianne quest, Marianne asks the Traveler to describe a flower from their homeland. Traveler proceeds to describe the Intevat, which apparently is a flower native to their homeland, but also the national flower of Conria. The sibling mentions how together they used to traverse worlds. They probably saw this field of their homeland's flowers in Tevat as a sign that they're meant to be here. Thus, they can't leave Tevat until they understand their purpose, aka the final answer. But how did those space flowers get there in the first place? According to the Per and Harry books and Arlecchino's backstory, it's possible that long ago, one of the Outlanders or potentially Descenders that Conria summoned to their land could have been from Aether and Lumine's home planet. And that's how the Intevat flower ended up there before Aether and Lumine arrived. Someone from their home planet already arrived at Conria, and that's why the sibling felt so compelled to stay in Tevat and find their purpose. It's also why I think when you pick Lumine as your Traveler, she already has the Intevats in her hair. They came from her homeland. It's even more eerie when you read the twins' character introduction cards. For Lumine, it says, "For your homeland has already been destroyed. You were originally supposed to own the world." For Aether, it says, "Everything is your world." Is the reason for their journey to find new worlds to save their dying home planet? To find a new home? And there are other travelers just like them from their home planet, it seems, if their home's flower was found in Conria. The realm suddenly starts to crumble. Care Bear's consciousness has faded away, meaning there's very little time left for the sibling reunion. The visuals start to break and the audio gets completely distorted. It's a super awesome and creepy effect. The sibling mentions one unfortunate thing, however. Neither of them will be able to remember anything that happened in the realm. Their reunion will be completely forgotten. Before the realm completely shatters, the sibling says something that doesn't get transcribed. I just wanted to mention that the realm shattering is a nice visual callback to the mirror breaking in the first Care Bear Archon quest. Traveler and Paimon later wake up in Vamara village. They'd been asleep for a long time and Traveler can only remember events up until the point where Care Bear's consciousness disappears. They don't remember the reunion with their sibling, but they have a feeling that they lost something. An injured Dainsleif had come earlier to check on the sleeping Traveler and Paimon and left shortly after, and that's the last we see of him. See you next year, Dainsleif. The villagers all seem to remember Care Bear's name, but there's a new detail. They remember seeing him leave the village with his parents. Thus, to them, the missing persons case is solved. We meet back with Atossa at the tree who's heartbroken. She reiterates something beautiful that Care Bear had said to her. It's the things we overcome that make life more precious. Before the quest ends, Traveler feels something in their pocket. It's a photo of them, their sibling, and Care Bear with a note saying, "You must get along with each other, the two of you." The end. Now, there's so much to unpack with this Archon quest, like who are the 5 sinners, who left the picture in Traveler's pocket, and so much more, I know. So let's break it down piece by piece. Let's start with the 5 sinners of Conria and Dainsleif, who suddenly revealed he had an older brother. 3 of these names might already be familiar to you. Sirtologi and Vedrfolnir were previously mentioned by Skirk during the last Fontaine Archon quest, and Reindotir is someone we have some pretty extensive sources on. Reindotir, aka Gold, is Albedo's master and creator, and she is the infamous Conrian alchemist who is popularly blamed for the release of abyssal monsters into the world during the Cataclysm. Durin, who attacked Mondstadt and whose body is now in Dragonspine, she created him. Elenes, who had a tussle with Fontaine and whose body is in Fontaine, she also created him. She was also already referred to as a sinner before the reveal of the 5 sinners. There's something interesting going on with Reindotir though. Dainsleif says that none of the 5 sinners came to Conria's aid during the Cataclysm. But the chunk of Eros Siderites says that when Conria was destroyed, a great sinner created endless monsters with dark, alien blood flowing through their veins. It almost seems like Reindotir's response to Celestia's potential atrocities against the Conrians was unleashing her deadly creations into the world. Not to mention, Reindotir is part of the witch coven, the Hexenzirkel, which vows to never fight each other. According to the dialogue in the Mage's Tea Party trailer, it also seems like they are to prioritize each other above all other organizations, which means she'd potentially have to side with the Hexenzirkel if they were to go against the other 5 sinners. Does this mean she's had a change of heart since the Cataclysm? She and Albedo discovered something called the Heart of Nibirius, and soon after, she encouraged Albedo to find out the truth of this world. We still don't know what the Heart of Nibirius is or what the truth of the world is either. So far, it doesn't seem like she's made any more Durins or Elenas or Golden Wolf Lords, but we don't know for sure. Albedo and Prime Albedo seem to be her only known creations after the Cataclysm. The name Reindotir could be a reference to the Rhine Maidens from Wagner's opera cycle, The Ring of Nibelung. The plot revolves around a magic ring that grants the power to rule the world, forged by the Nibelung dwarf Alberic, from gold he stole from the Rhine Maidens in the River Rhine. You might recognize these names. Wagner, our favorite blacksmith, Alberic like Kaya Alberic and the Conrian clan. Nibelung was revealed to be the Dragon King of the 7 Sovereigns during Nahida's Story Quest Act 2. And we find out from the Kavrina of Good and Evil World Quest that Dainsleif is in possession of some ring. The Ring of Nibelung, perhaps? Even though Genshin has incredible influence from so many literary sources around the world, it doesn't necessarily translate one-to-one in Genshin's story. I think the Ring of Nibelung deserves its own deep dive video, so let's head back to the 5 sinners. In the meantime, I just want you to think about the connections for a sec. Rerir is known as Rächer of Solnari, which loosely translates to Avenger of Solnari. Some folks claim that in the Chinese version of the text, this translates to Moon Killer. The implications of that are insane, because Killer of the 3 Moon Goddesses? Killer of the Crimson Moon Dynasty? Rerir was the name of a ruler in Norse mythology. Sirtologi the Foul is Skirk's master and is the owner of the all-devouring narwhal. The name Sirtologi is a bright flame sword wielded by the fire giant Surtur in Norse mythology. Surtur is a major figure of Ragnarok whose flames will burn the world until it is reborn again. All of this is actually a win for Child mains. As the Foul legacy, Child is probably going to have insane lore importance in the coming story. I'll honestly be disappointed if he doesn't. In his boss description, there's this line: "Become the strength by which you will overturn this world." Almost sounds like a promise that Child is going to be a major player when it comes to potentially the Fatui's plans and even the 5 Sinners' plans, since Sirtologi and Vedrfolnir seem to have orchestrated the events leading up to the all-devouring narwhal's appearance in the Fontaine Archon quests. The narwhal was Sirtologi's pet, and the Fontaine prophecy came from Vedrfolnir. Vedrfolnir, the visionary, is the sinner in the crystal and is also Dainsleif's older brother. Back in the first Care Bear Archon quest, his ideology is what prompted Clother Alberic to found the Abyss Order. Vedrfolnir is also the one who may have talked the sibling to the Abyss's side. Note his title, the Visionary. According to Mona in the Fontaine Archon quest, visionaries are very powerful prophets who are able to read the fortune of the entire world. Mona's master, the Hexenzirkel witch Barbeloth, is also a visionary, and some members of the Hexenzirkel are speculated to have this ability as well. In Norse mythology, Vedrfolnir is a hawk sitting between the eyes of an unnamed eagle that is perched on top of the world tree Yggdrasil, which is interesting because his younger brother Dainsleif is the bough keeper of the main branch of what I assume is the Irminsul tree. This gives me the impression that the five sinners may have been sages or close confidants of King Irmin, the last known ruler of Conria. They may have also been the sages that Piero was referring to in the Mocking Mask artifact. Piero failed in stopping these sages from tearing away the veil of sin, ushering in a tide of divine wrath, destruction, and foolishness. This lines up with Dainsleif saying the five sinners could not resist the call of the Abyss and divided amongst themselves a power that could destroy the world. Roptatyr the Wise is super interesting since Roptatyr is another name for the Norse god Odin. Odin was a god dedicated to the pursuit of wisdom and divine knowledge, even sacrificing his body for it. In order to gain wisdom from the Well of Mimir, he gouges one of his eyes out. Get ready for this though. The Old Norse form of Irmin is Jormunr, which is one of the names of Odin. Could this mean Roptatyr is also the name of the Conrian king Irmin? Under Irmin's reign, Conria obtained forbidden knowledge and created their advanced machinery. No one could get Irmin to stop the use of forbidden knowledge, and this may have been one of the reasons for the cataclysm. If not Irmin himself, Roptatyr could have been Irmin's heir to the throne. It seems Roptatyr was inactive or away from Conria, since during the cataclysm, according to Dainsleif, none of the five sinners came to the country's aid. And Torfus Alberic had to step in as regent before the cataclysm due to Irmin's sudden indisposed state and inability to rule. As of this video, there seems to be a lore discrepancy between the English and Chinese version of the text. According to the English text, Dainsleif states that only Vedrfolnir is his older brother, while in the Chinese text, it's implied that all five sinners are Dainsleif's siblings. Take this with a grain of salt. It could imply that Dainsleif and his siblings are potential heirs to the throne of Conria, and Dainsleif is seeking revenge on his whole family. But again, take it with a grain of salt. For now and for the rest of this video, I'm gonna stick with Dainsleif's only older sibling being Vedrfolnir, until we get a clearer stance in the Chinese translation, which hopefully we get before this video's out. With a name like the Five Sinners, it's highly likely they, and possibly the Abyss Order, are seriously up to some evil. And the implications of what they're trying to do are kind of scary. Think back to the We Will Be Reunited Archon quest, and think back to the Upside Down statue. In order to activate the statue's power, it seems, the Abyss Order sacrificed the life of a Fontaine thief. Similarly, in order to activate the Loom of Fate, Caraber's life was sacrificed. There are implications that the Loom of Fate is yet to reach its full potential, and in that case, what sacrifice is needed in order for that to happen? I wouldn't be surprised if Dainsleif is desperate to save our sibling due to the Abyss Order possibly sacrificing them to achieve their higher goals. There's an even darker implication that the reason the five sinners stayed silent during the cataclysm is because they needed the mass destruction of human life in exchange for something else. The five sinners have become transcendent beings and probably achieved what the scientist René de Petrichor of the Narzissenkreuz had been trying to accomplish his whole life. They're probably nearly as powerful, if not just as powerful, as the Senders and godly beings. The five sinners and Dainsleif were tasked with defeating the Vinster King and stop him from rocking the foundations of the world. There could be a couple identities for this Vinster King. Now, a possible interpretation of this is that they were tasked with protecting Conria from its own King Irmin, who was actively encouraging the use of forbidden knowledge, which may have potentially doomed their land. It could allude to the heavenly principles. This might be a stretch, but the term Vinster sounds like Finster. Howard Finster was an American artist and Baptist minister who claimed to have been called to spread the gospel through his outsider or visionary art. According to an analysis essay, The Finster Mythos, Finster proclaimed that he was like the primal patriarch of the Old Testament. He identified himself and these biblical patriarchs as strangers from another world. which leads me to think that the Vinster King might be the Primordial One, the god who was a stranger to Teyvat. The Primordial One is an alien god who came to Teyvat and defeated the 7 dragon sovereigns in order to claim the lands for the arrival of humans. We don't know where or what's been happening to the Primordial One, but it could be a possible identity for the Vinster King. The Vinster King could also be the Dragon King Nibelung, and remember, Dainsleif seems to have Nibelung's ring according to the Cavrina world quests. The Vinster King could also be the Heavenly Principles, whom the sibling says is still asleep. This is the first time we've seen the term Vinster King also, so the possibilities are plenty for now. Speaking of the Heavenly Principles, what do the Abyss Order and the Fatui plan to do with it? The Abyss Order with their Loom of Fate seem to have the goal of rewriting history. The Loom of Fate is intended to create new ley lines. It doesn't have the power to destroy them, however. According to Dainsleif, the Abyss Order doesn't have the power to alter reality, yet, but it doesn't rule out the possibility that they could in the future. The Fatui, on the other hand, are preparing for war against the Heavenly Principle by collecting the Gnosis, which we now know are made from the body of the 3rd Descender. The reasons we probably won't see the Abyss working with the Fatui is because of their contradicting ideologies. The Fatui is seemingly planning to give the Heavenly Principles a taste of its own medicine, while the Abyss Order plans to defeat the Heavenly Principles with the Abyss. Speaking of Abyss Order versus Heavenly Principles, can we still trust our sibling? Dainsleif asks Traveler an important question: do they think their sibling has betrayed them? The Traveler seems super unsure about their answer. Dainsleif does say that there's still time and that the damage done is not irreparable yet. This seems to imply that Dainsleif is aware of some trickery the sibling might be pulling on us. But wait, if we can't trust our sibling, why would they divulge their plans and be vulnerable with us in Care Bear's consciousness? The sibling knew that the realm would collapse and that we'd forget everything, so it was okay to entertain us in that moment. With the sibling having what appears to be unwavering determination for the Abyss Order, I feel like our sibling might be more far gone than we realize or want to admit. However, there seems to be an unseen force that wants the siblings to reconcile. Remember the photograph in Traveler's Pocket? Its item name is the group photo from an unknown time, and its description says that it's a precious group photo that has surpassed the rules somehow, being taken by some unknown person using unknown means in a space that should no longer exist. I have maybe 2 guesses for the identity of the person who left this photo in Traveler's Pocket. Number 1, Istaroth, the missing goddess of time and wind. This photo surpassed the rules of the world, meaning something like a divine being on the same level as the Heavenly Principles was able to give the Traveler this photo. Who better than a shining shade? Istaroth is also called the Goddess of Moments in the Byakuyokoku collection, where she was first introduced. In a quest where time doesn't move and memories are muddled, it would make sense for her to be present if she is still alive. I'm hoping From an Unknown Time is a play on words like it's from Istaroth. Number 2, it could also be the Hexenzirkel witch Nicole, who spoke to us telepathically in the Sumeru Interlude quest and the last Fontaine Archon quest. She has mostly been acting as an observer in the story, and seeing as the witches are powerful beings, I wouldn't put it past one of them to have a power such as this. As we can see in the 4.7 endgame mode to come, and with the witch Anders Dottir possibly being the author to some of Teyvat's most important books, they're all about their stories. Encouraging the Traveler to reconcile with the sibling could be one of those fated paths that could guarantee our Traveler's happy ending. I'm reminded of Dainsleif's cryptic lines in the Travail trailer. Defeat me, command me to step aside, show me that you are worthier than I to rescue her. Then, the threads of all fate will be yours to reweave. Is Dainsleif insinuating that he will use the Loom of Fate? But if we defeat him, we can use it, and the thread of all fate will be ours to reweave. I think Dainsleif and his quotes deserve a whole other deep dive, I'm telling you. So many of these topics deserve its own video because it's so much to cover in just one video. There's also Dainsleif's prophecy in his character introduction. Dane, what is that strand of blonde hair to you? Someone you must kill? Or the object of your penitence? Which we now know could be referring to his older brother Vedrfolnir. The word penitence, though, is very specific because penitence is the action of feeling or showing sorrow and regret, repentance. Dainsleif might feel guilty about something and we don't know exactly what yet. This prophecy and his introduction comes from a self-proclaimed prophet, which could be his older brother since we know he's a visionary, the highest form of a prophet. One of my favorite lines in this quest was a sibling's line about Dainsleif. Sending an army to fight him would be sending them all to their doom. The only reason the sibling won that fight against Ainsleif was because he refused to raise his sword against them, and he was very much holding back. That's just so badass, and I'm honestly expecting Dainsleif's playable kit to reflect his strength. His name is one of the famous swords in Norse mythology. I'll be covering more Genshin Impact lore on this patch like the Hexen Circle event on my Twitch channel and in future videos, so stay tuned. If you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. I'm your Leafy Lore Shira Minzliff, and I read the Genshin Impact lore so that you don't have to.